The high Uinta Mountains of northeastern Utah are unlike any other mountain range in the United States. Unlike the Rocky Mountains that run north to south, the Uintas stretch east to west, forming a massive wilderness barrier across northern Utah. From above, the region looks almost endless. Thousands of square miles of dense forest, jagged peaks rising more than 13,000 feet into the sky, hundreds of alpine lakes carved by ancient glaciers, and valleys so remote that some areas remain almost untouched by modern civilization. But beauty in the wilderness often hides danger. The same forests that attract hunters, hikers, and adventurers can quickly become a maze. The same mountains that look majestic during the day can become terrifying after sunset. Temperatures here can drop rapidly, even in early fall. Strong winds sweep across the ridges, and once you step far enough into the backcountry, cell phone signals disappear completely. Out here, you're on your own. In the fall of 2015, a group of hunters entered this vast wilderness. For them, the trip was supposed to be simple. A few days in the mountains, time spent tracking game, campfires under the stars, stories shared among friends. For many hunters, trips like this are a tradition, a chance to escape the noise of the modern world and reconnect with nature. The group prepared the way experienced hunters always do. They packed food, survival gear, navigation equipment, and weapons. They studied maps of the terrain. They knew the mountains could be unpredictable, but they had confidence. They had done this before. What none of them realized was that this hunting trip would soon turn into a search and rescue operation. Because within a matter of hours, one of them would disappear into the mountains, and for the next 5 days he would fight to survive in one of the most unforgiving wilderness areas in the American West. The morning began cold. As the first light of dawn crept across the mountain peaks, a thin layer of frost covered the ground around the hunters' camp. The forest was quiet. Only the distant sound of wind moving through the trees could be heard. This is the kind of morning hunters wait for. Cold air helps carry sound, animals are more active, and the wilderness feels alive. The hunters slowly prepared for the day. Coffee warmed their hands. Boots crunched softly on frozen soil. Rifles were checked and secured. The group reviewed their plan before heading into the forest. Like many hunting trips, they would spread out slightly. This allowed them to cover more ground and increase their chances of spotting game. It's a common practice among experienced hunters. Each member of the group moved into the forest quietly, following separate paths. The trees swallowed them one by one. Within minutes, the camp was silent again. Among them was one hunter who would soon face the most difficult challenge of his life. He moved deeper into the forest, carefully scanning the terrain. Tracks in the soil, broken branches, signs that animals had passed through recently. The terrain grew steeper as he climbed higher along a forested ridge. The trees thickened, the ground became rocky, and, slowly, the distance between him and the rest of the group grew larger. At first, it didn't seem like a problem. After all, hunters often move independently for hours before regrouping, but the Uinta Mountains are deceptive. A single ridge can block your view. Dense forests can hide familiar landmarks, and after a few turns, even experienced outdoorsmen can become disoriented. At some point that morning, The hunter stopped and looked around. Something didn't feel right. The forest looked unfamiliar. He turned around, trying to retrace his steps, but every direction looked the same. Tall pine trees, rocky slopes, endless wilderness. The realization crept in slowly. He may have wandered farther than he thought. He called out. His voice echoed through the trees. But no one answered. At first, the hunter stayed calm. Panic is one of the most dangerous enemies in survival situations. So he took a moment to think. He tried to remember the direction he had come from. He studied the slope of the terrain. He looked for signs of his own tracks. But the forest floor was covered in pine needles and fallen leaves. There were no clear footprints. The mountains around him were quiet and unfamiliar. Still, he believed he could find his way back. He began walking slowly, hoping to reconnect with the trail or hear voices from the hunting group. Minutes turned into hours. The sun moved steadily across the sky, and the deeper he walked, the less familiar the terrain became. Soon the trees grew thicker, the slopes grew steeper, and the realization became impossible to ignore. He was lost. This wasn't just a wrong turn. He had become completely separated from the group, and the wilderness around him stretched for miles in every direction. As afternoon faded into evening, the hunter faced a new threat. Night in the Uinta Mountains. Temperatures in the high elevations can drop quickly after sunset. Even in early fall, the cold can become dangerous. Without proper shelter, exposure can lead to hypothermia. The hunter knew he couldn't keep wandering in the dark. Moving blindly through the mountains at night could lead to injury, or worse. So he began searching for a place to rest. He found a cluster of trees that blocked some of the wind. Using branches and pine needles, he created a rough bed on the forest floor. It wasn't comfortable, but it might help protect him from the cold ground. As darkness settled over the forest, the temperature dropped rapidly. The wilderness transformed. The forest that once felt peaceful now felt endless and isolating. Every sound seemed louder. The snapping of twigs, the distant cry of animals, the wind moving through the branches. Alone in the darkness, the hunter wrapped himself in what little protection he had and waited for morning. But the cold made sleep almost impossible. Back at camp, the other hunters began to worry. At first, they assumed their missing companion had simply taken a longer route through the forest. But as evening passed, concern turned into alarm. They called out through the trees, whistled, waited, no answer. By nightfall, the group realized something was wrong. They contacted authorities and reported the missing hunter. Soon, search and rescue teams were mobilized. These teams were experienced in wilderness searches. They understood the challenges of the Uinta Mountains. Helicopters prepared for aerial searches. Ground teams organized search grids. Tracking dogs were brought in. But the wilderness was enormous. Finding one person among thousands of acres of forest would not be easy. Meanwhile, the hunter continued his struggle to survive. Each morning he woke cold, stiff, and exhausted. He rationed his energy carefully. Moving too quickly could lead to injury or exhaustion. He followed streams when he could find them. Water sources can sometimes lead to trails or human activity. But the terrain remained difficult. Rocky ridges, thick forests, steep slopes that drained his strength. At night, the cold returned. Each evening became another battle against freezing temperatures. He built makeshift bedding from branches and leaves. He tried to stay dry. He tried to stay warm. Most importantly, he tried to stay calm, because he knew something important. Search teams would eventually be looking for him. He just had to stay alive long enough to be found. By the 5th day, the hunter's strength was fading. Hunger and exhaustion had taken their toll, but the search teams were closing in. The helicopters scanned valleys from the sky. Ground teams expanded their search area, and, finally, in a remote section of the mountains, rescuers spotted something. Movement. A person, weak but alive. The hunter had survived 5 days alone in the wilderness. Search teams quickly reached him. He was dehydrated and exhausted, but remarkably alive. After days of uncertainty, the missing hunter had been found. The Uinta Mountains remain one of the most beautiful wilderness areas in the United States. But stories like this remind us how quickly things can change in the backcountry. Nature does not forgive mistakes easily. Even experienced outdoorsmen can become lost. But survival is possible, with knowledge, with determination, and with the incredible dedication of search and rescue teams who refuse to give up. For this hunter, the mountains became a test of endurance. A 5-day battle against cold, hunger, and isolation. And a story that would remind many people of one important truth. In the wilderness, preparation and respect for nature can mean the difference between life and death. If you want the next story, subscribe now so you don't miss the next survival story.